Well, we are now into October here in Scotland, and the weather has taken a turn for the worse, cold and wet. So I thought maybe a good excuse to head for the greenhouse to make my next video. So this video is on a plant which will probably grow outside in many parts of the world, but in Scotland here it can only be a houseplant as it is frost tender. And it is Streptocarpus, which translated from Latin means twisted fruit. These tender plants can be found growing wild in Africa, Madagascar or even warmer parts of China, and the common name is Cape Primrose. They have clusters of funnel-shaped flowers, usually each with 5 layered lobes held high above slightly wrinkled, elongated foliage. There are hundreds of varieties in cultivation today, with Dibley's nursery in the UK being famous for introducing many new cultivars, as well as being, I suspect, the largest grower of Streptocarpus in the UK. And by the way, I don't have any ties to Dibley's. It is simply where I bought most of my plants from. Like many enthusiastic gardeners in the UK and probably throughout the world, I have visited Royal Horticultural Society shows such as Chelsea and Hampton Court in London and been mesmerised simply standing in front of Dibley's show stand. The range of colours is vast and the varieties are huge in number. I quite often feel tempted and I just want to buy them all. But I would need a much bigger greenhouse than my current 8x10. And just think of the heating bill nowadays. Like many houseplants, they flower best if slightly pot bound. This puts a little bit of stress in the plant and it switches on its survival mode. It does after all want to produce more flowers so that it can reproduce and create more progeny in order to survive. Never overpot any flowering plants as they will simply go into growth mode, producing more foliage and fewer flowers until the roots once again fill the pot. You must however remember that plants do need some space for roots to grow, and of course compost does run out of steam after a couple of years. So you'll need to refresh it by either removing some of the old compost and replacing it with fresh compost, if you want to keep the plant in the same size pot, or adding fresh compost when you repot your plants into a new pot, one size up from the existing one. Don't overpot. With Streptocarpus, watering can be a bit of a challenge. In summer, when actively growing, water frequently, allowing the compost to dry out between waterings. However, in winter you have to be extremely careful not to overwater. If you do overwater, quite often the roots will rot and the plant will start to wilt, and when it wilts you think it's run out of water, so you overwater it again. Allow the compost to dry out if you've done this, and increase the watering gradually over a period of time. Let's have a look now at how to propagate Streptocarpus. To start, cut a nice healthy leaf from your Streptocarpus. You will now need a pair of scissors, pot with seed and cutting compost, and a dibber. Take the leaf and cut it into 3 or 4 pieces, depending on its length. Discard the small leaf stalk at the end of the leaf, as this will not root. Arrange the pieces so that they are all pointing in the one direction. In this case, the tip of the leaf is to the right. With your dibber, make a slit in the compost and gently push the leaf down into the slit, making sure you don't damage the leaf. Firm the compost round about the leaf to make sure that the compost has good contact with the leaf itself. Otherwise, it will not root. Water well with tepid, not cold water, and use a fine rose on a watering can. Remember to label your cutting with the name and the date. Now cover the pot with a clear poly bag, making sure the bag itself doesn't touch any of the cuttings. This is to help maintain the moisture levels and encourage rooting. About once a week I tend to take the bag off and allow the top of the compost to dry out a little bit. That discourages fungal growth. And then put the bag back on again. Place the pot in a warm, bright place, not in direct sunlight as that will tend to scorch the cuttings, and just make sure that they're always slightly moist but not too damp, otherwise once again this will encourage fungal growth. Now you have to be patient. It can take up to 3 months for the cuttings to root, and once they've rooted, gently prise them out the seed and cutting compost and pot them up into a nice houseplant compost and grow them on as you would with any other Streptocarpus. And here are some of mine that I took about 3 months ago. I have been quite lucky and have had very few pest problems with my Streptocarpus, occasionally as well a touch of green fly on the flower stalks. This is quite easy to control. Do watch however for mealybugs and mites in the plants, and occasionally vine weevil larvae find the roots extremely tasty. Streptocarpus like a fairly bright position but not in direct sunlight during spring and summer. In winter you can place in direct sunlight due to the weakness of the sun, which will be low in the sky. I found a minimum winter temperature of 7 degrees centigrade and a maximum temperature of 21 degrees centigrade is fine. Recently I bought a collection of new varieties and potted these up on arrival into a multi-purpose compost, which I've added about 50% John Innes. That's a loam-based compost, just simply as a trial. It may work, it may not, but to be sensible you should pot your Streptocarpus simply into houseplant compost. Here are the new varieties, although to be honest I'm not sure that the label colours are terribly accurate.